Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers. Welcome back to the She Reads Romance Books podcast. So happy that you are joining me today for one of my favorite episodes to put together, which is my reading list of the month, where I talk about the books that I read and which that I recommend you read, pick up, and definitely add to your TBR list, as well as giving you my honest thoughts about those that I think you might just want to pass on because they didn't quite meet my expectations. I am sitting here with my new favorite obsession. I am now really into drinking matcha lattes. I shouldn't say never. I'm no longer much of a coffee drinker. I'm much more of a tea drinker these days. But I just recently got into matcha lattes and I'm loving them. I heat up the matcha with some almond milk, and it's just super delicious. And if you try them yourself, you definitely need to get one of those like little handheld mixers to mix the matcha in with the milk of your choice, because otherwise it does not mix well and it's kind of gross, and then you end up wasting a ton of the matcha in the cup by the end of it. But every morning now, I've just been pouring my little matcha in my cup, heating up my almond milk, using my little handy dandy mixer to put it all together, and then I'm enjoying my little green concoction. So anyway, I'm here drinking that while we talk about the books that I read in April, which were a ton. Gosh, overall, I read 14 books this month, which isn't too shabby, for me. I actually attribute that to 6 books that I was able to read while we were on spring break in early April. And man, do I love just cranking through books while I'm at the pool or at the beach. And it's funny because one day while I was walking on the beach, I saw a woman reading Caught Up by Liz Tomford. And I, of course, had to stop and interrupt her and ask her how she was liking it and talk shop. It was so much fun to see, what other people read and find other romance book lovers on the beach. But since I have 14 books to talk about, let's just get to it. I'll try not to make this episode go too long. But the first book that I read this month was The Trail of Lost Hearts by Tracy Garvis Graves. This book was on my list of most anticipated new romance books for 2024, and it released at the end of March, so I was happy to snag a copy at my local library before we took off on vacay. I was super excited to read it because I honestly had yet to read a book by this author before, even though On the Island has been on my TBR list for forever. I also wanted to read it because I thought it was just a unique story about 2 characters who meet while geocaching. And I know I've talked about this probably, I think, in my March new releases episode because I thought it was pretty cool. But it's basically about Ren Waters, who has this heartbreaking occurrence that she's trying to put behind her, and she ends up by disappearing into her world of geocaching, and she decides that a week-long solo quest geocaching in Oregon is exactly what she needs. And then she runs into fellow hiker Marshall Hendricks, who is also struggling with a life-altering blow of his own. As I said, I really enjoyed the story hook about geocaching, and I liked that Ren and Marshall meet on a hiking trail, as these are kind of like the best parts of the book, in my opinion. Their respective backstories were pretty interesting as well. However, the writing itself felt just a bit forced to me, and the storyline, once they kind of got off the trail, went a bit sideways for me, to be quite honest. I can appreciate that they formed this really strong attachment and connection to one another after just a week on the trail. But they didn't really learn that much about each other to be able to make some serious life decisions later on in the book. Wren pretty much, told Marshall to make an all or nothing decision after some pretty major changes were shared. And I just didn't think that was a realistic ask of him after they only spent, as I said, that 1 week together. And I also didn't really care for that, oh my God, discovery in the second part of the book, though it might not bother other readers. So if you're a fan of this author's work, then I would recommend reading it, but it just didn't quite meet my expectations. But the next book that I read by the pool, which was glorious, was The Rom-Commers by Katherine Center. This is her upcoming, I'd say, kind of office romance, forced proximity romance that is going to release June 11th. And here is what it's about. Emma Wheeler desperately longs to be a screenwriter. She has spent her life studying, obsessing over, and writing romantic comedies that have won contests, but she's also been the sole caretaker for her kind-hearted dad who needs full-time care. Now, when she gets a chance to rewrite a script for famous screenwriter Charlie Yates, her personal writing god, it's a break too big to pass up. Emma's younger sister then steps in for caretaking duties, and Emma moves to LA for 6 weeks for the writing gig of a lifetime. But what is it they say? Don't meet your heroes. Charlie Yates doesn't want to write with anyone, much less a failed nobody screenwriter. Worse, the romantic comedy he's written is so terrible, it might actually bring on the apocalypse. Plus, he doesn't even care about the script. It just is a means to get a different one greenlit. Oh, and he thinks love is an emotional Ponzi scheme. But Emma is not going down without a fight. She will stand up for herself and for rom-coms and for love itself. She will convince him that love stories matter, even if she has to kiss him senseless to do it. But what if that kiss is accidentally amazing? And what if real life turns out to be so much more real than fiction? What if the love story they're writing breaks all Emma's rules and comes true? Oh my gosh, you guys. Let me just say that this is now my new favorite Katherine Center book. It's a rom-com about rom-coms that hit with all the feels, and it's honestly one of the best books I've read this year. So just trust me, go pre-order it now, buy it. It's awesome. It's pretty much been a no-brainer to me to pick up Katherine Center's new romance each year, but I really have to say The Rom-Commers is my new favorite work because it is such a love letter to readers who love romance and moviegoers who love rom-coms. I actually got to talk to Katherine, which was amazing, for an upcoming episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast, which you're definitely going to want to tune into because she just was a gem. We could have I had to finally be conscious of her time and say, okay, we should probably wrap it up because I think we could have just talked all afternoon. But that episode, like I said, is going to be dropping later this month. And if you are a book club member, you'll also get access to my extended exclusive video interview with her that shares so much more. So you definitely want to join and tune in to have access to that. But back to the rom-commers, I just adored Emma's staunch love and defense of the beloved rom-com in cinema, but it's truly the characters and the central message that love and gratitude is what makes the world go round that really made this, as I said, one of the best of the year. I am a romance book lover and a rom-com lover at heart, and this book just sort of felt like a fun defense of everything that I love about reading and watching rom-coms. Too often, I don't know about you, but I feel like I have to defend this love of the genre, right, to others who feel like it's an inferior genre. So I was really cheering Emma on when she was defending it and schooling Charlie on the merits of rom-coms and why they're just as valid as, say, a thriller or an action movie. And if that doesn't convince you to read it, then read it to meet Emma's dad. Oh man, do I love this man and his attitude towards life. He's a small sort of secondary character, but has such a big impact on that story. I've already gone into it a ton, but I won't go more into it for fear of just talking the day away. But You can check out my full review on She Reads Romance Books for more, but just trust me and go order the rom-commers. It was awesome. Okay. Next on my list was Once Persuaded, Twice Shy by Melody Edwards. Another new author to me and another book I snagged from the library. It's awesome. I adore Jane Austen retellings, and this is a modern retelling of Persuasion, which released this past February. I recently re-watched the Persuasion movie, the recent edition one with Dakota Johnson, so the storyline was kind of fresh and center in my mind, and I really enjoyed this novel. But if you're not familiar with it, here is what it's about. When Anne Elliot broke up with Ben Wentworth, it seems like the right thing to do, but now, 8 years later, she's not so sure. In her scenic hometown of Niagara-on-the-Lake, Anne is comfortable focusing on her successful career, filling her late mother's shoes as town councilor and executive director of her theater company. She certainly keeps busy as the all-around wrangler of eccentric locals, self-centered family members, elaborate festivals, and the occasional attacking goose. But the more she tries to convince herself that her life is fine as is, the more it all feels like a show and not nearly as good as the ones put on by her theater company. She's the always responsible Anne, always taken for granted and cleaning up after other people, and the memories of happier times with Ben Wentworth still haunt her. So when the nearby Kelly Lynch Winery is bought by Ben's aunt and uncle, Anne's world is set ablaze as her old flame crashes back into her life. And it's clear he hasn't forgiven her for breaking his heart. A joint project between the winery and Anne's theater forces both Ben and Anne to confront their complicated history, and as they spend more time together, Anne can't help but wonder if there might be hope for their future after all. So we have this bookshelf when you walk into our public library that has all of the new fiction titles on it. And in my library, I have to say, has been getting more and more new romance titles. So I'm always, when I go in, quickly scanning this bookshelf whenever I go inside before we probably go down to the children's section. And this one just is one of those, I saw it and I had to grab it kind of books. And I'm so glad that I did, because while I have not read the Jane Austen classic, but have watched the movie, or I should say movies, I thought this was just a really fantastic modern retelling and a wonderful second chance romance. If you're a fan of the classic, I think you'll enjoy it. I thought the writing was fantastic and totally swept me into the story. This definitely won't be my last by this author. I think she has a modern retelling of Jane Eyre, so you can check out that one, but I hope she has more Austen retellings in the works because it was really, really good. My next book of the month was Moon Touched by Elizabeth Briggs. I was just in the mood and craving a werewolf romance, and I definitely enjoyed this one, which is book 1 in her Zodiac Wolves series. I love books that are based on the zodiac signs. I just think it's a really unique twist to a storyline. In this book, the different packs are all based on different zodiac signs, but here is what the book's about. As the half-human outcast of the Cancer Pack, I've been beaten and bullied my whole life. Gaining my wolf form and my fated mate is my only chance to change packs and hope for a better life. Except when my fated mate is revealed, he's the future alpha of the Leo Pack, our worst enemies. He rejects me in front of everyone just before the Leos slaughter my entire pack and murder my family. I manage to escape, but then I'm kidnapped by a far greater threat. The alpha of the mysterious lost pack. The 13th sign was banished from the Zodiac Wolves years ago, and I thought they were just a myth. They're real. They're holding me captive, and the dark, dangerous alpha is offering me something I can't refuse: revenge. This book, it follows a popular formula for some werewolf romances that includes, a girl bullied by her pack and then rejected by her fated mate. But of course, there's, more to the girl than really meets the eye that you come to find out. I thought this was a really good first book to this series that builds up the world of the various packs in what Ayla was living through. And as I said, it totally fits the formula, but it has this uniqueness to it too, I'll say, and I think it would hook you to continue with the series. So definitely worth checking out if you like werewolf romances, especially because it's available to read on Kindle Unlimited, which is why I decided to give it a go. And also because Briggs was a new author to me. I really liked it. I've since, I think, updated my werewolf romance book list on She Reads Romance Books, so head on over and check that out too for even more books to read. My next book that I'm still read while I was on vacation had some steam to it, and that was The Anti-Hero by Sarah Kate. I decided to read this one since it's the first book in her Good Brothers series because I was thinking I'd read book 2, which just came out this month, called The Homewrecker. But then I decided, nah, I'm not going to read The Homewrecker because I think I have to be in the right mood and frame of mind to read that one, which is about a married couple and it has some cheating in it, I think. Or, yeah, might be. I'm not really sure. And so I decided to just stick with this one for now, which is a fake relationship romance. And again, available to read in Kindle Unlimited. It is about Adam Good, the oldest son of a local preacher of a megachurch in Austin, Texas. He's lived his entire life with the goal of taking over his father's church, so he's lived a life on the straight and narrow, pretty much. But his father, gosh, he's a total douchebag and a narcissist. The type of person I really cannot stand in how they wield their power, especially over others. He was just the type of guy who would shame people, like from the pulpit, and then, talking about the wicked ways of people who attend sex clubs. And yet he was the person cheating on his wife and attending the club every night. One day, Adam meets this tattooed, covered, pink-haired, nose ring and lip ring wearing woman at his favorite diner and gets to talking with her. And she gives him a card to her Club Pink, and he decides to try and find her there one night, only realizing it's a sex club and seeing his father there with another woman, which totally flips his world upside down. Sage also realizes that her boyfriend, the owner of the club, is a complete douchebag as well, who she works for, but who never really takes her seriously. So she dumps his ass, and what better way than to get back at her ex and for Adam to get back at his father and ruin his reputation than to pretend to date each other and create sex tapes that they post online. Okay, so there's a lot there, and honestly, I didn't really understand Adam's logic that by becoming this online porn star, he'd ruin his dad's reputation, but whatever. They went with it, I went with it, Their scenes, I have to say, were pretty hot, and it became obvious that despite being so different on the outside, they really fit and started falling for each other. They also explored this idea of degradation kink, which Sage loved and really pushed Adam's boundaries. I liked the book. I'm totally glad that I read it, but something, I don't really know what it was, kept me from really sinking into these characters. It kind of felt like I was reading something taboo just for taboo's sake. It maybe felt like a bit forced, but overall it was really well written, had an interesting hook, and I do like that Sarah Kate sort of writes these taboo romances, but check it out if it interests you. Okay, the next book that I listened to, I should say, as an audiobook while we were driving to our vacation and back home again. I had to be, oh my gosh, super careful that my car's Bluetooth didn't pick up the book because it had some really steamy scenes, and that just would have been hella awkward if the car did pick it up, and I would have been completely mortified. But anyway, I'm talking about Good Girl Fail by Ronnie Loren, which was actually on my list of most anticipated new romance books of 2023. So I was so glad that I finally got to read or listen to it this April. I'm such a fan of Ronnie Loren's books, and before her recent contemporary reads, she wrote more erotic romance, and this book was sort of a return to those roots. It's a new adult romance set in college where our heroine, O'Neill, enrolls as a freshman. She's cut off from her grandparents who raised her since her mother was killed when she was in kindergarten. They raised her under the strictest household, not wanting her to grow up like her party girl mother, which wasn't true, we come to find out. And they really swung that pendulum in the complete opposite direction, right? Having her attend a Catholic school, never letting her date, not even letting her use tampons. I mean, whacked people. But when she applies for a public college and gets a full ride, she sort of bucks their orders to attend the local all-girls college, and so hence she's cut off. So there's O'Neill, this innocent girl who's thrown into taking care of herself and navigating the world of dating and going to class by herself until her best friend's older brother, Auden, is told by his mother to check on O'Neill and make sure that she's okay. Well, Auden and his roommate, his best friend Lennox, help O'Neill move in and tell her to contact them if she ever needs them or gets into trouble. And Auden definitely sort of takes this big brother approach, even though he and O'Neill kissed once in the past. And she's sort of like, yeah, I'm not having this. But one thing sort of happens and the boys sort of come to rescue her. And she ends up asking Auden to be her teacher to help her navigate what it means to be with a guy and to basically take her virginity. I think I've said this time and time again. I love the relationship coach trope, or at least that's what I call it. And this definitely fits, but it's also kind of a look into how young adults sort of discover and try to reconcile their desire for a specific kink when society makes them feel shameful for those desires. That is honestly, I think, the best part about this book is that exploration and the discussions between these three characters about what they like and how they feel about it and exploring those desires with one another. And of course, in doing so, there are several very hot, very steamy scenes, which were fantastic. I liked O'Neill and her desire to learn and experience life without people restricting her or telling her how to feel or how to act. Auden was a great hero, and I appreciated his struggle with his kink too and how he didn't really want to corrupt O'Neill. But I actually liked Lennox the best. He was Auden's best friend and roommate. He just had this calm, wise, beyond his years vibe, and he is really what brought everyone together. So he was definitely my favorite. I do agree with some other reviewers that the storyline about O'Neill's mother was kind of unnecessary for how long it went on, considering the ending was kind of lackluster from what I was expecting. And there is a bit of insta-love that I didn't quite buy into. It would have just been fine with them just admitting that they wanted a relationship together, but I didn't need them professing their love to one another, blah, blah, blah. But regardless, I still really enjoyed this book and recommend it if you're open to steamy college romance that explores kink and is an MMF romance. That's Good Girl Fail by Ronnie Loren. All right, moving on to the next book I read is another that I picked up on Kindle Unlimited, and that is Tempting Promises by Corinne Michaels. I think this might be my first Corinne Michaels read, which is kind of surprising to me, but I think it is. It's an enemies to lovers romance, which is why I picked it, because one of the challenges for the April 2024 Romance Book Reading Challenge was to read a book in a favorite trope, and I love enemies to lovers. I have to admit, though, when I sat down to think about this episode and this list, I couldn't really remember this book or honestly even picture the book cover. So that's never really a great sign after you read a book that you have to kind of like rack your brain. What was it about again? But here's what it's about to refresh my memory and maybe yours if you're new to it. Okay. What's the worst thing you could do when you're stranded in the woods with your rival? Sleep with him. That's what. Not only is Rowan Whitlock my sister's ex, but we're both vying for the contract that would save my family farm. So why did it have to be Rowan who came to my rescue after I fell on a remote hiking trail? When the weather turned unexpectedly, we were forced to find shelter and ride out the storm. Only that wasn't the only thing I ended up riding. We promise ourselves that what happens at the cabin stays at the cabin, but when we get back to Sugarloaf, it's impossible to stay away from him. Those blue eyes captivate me, his strong body comforts me, and he makes me feel beautiful, which is crazy, right? If only my stupid head would listen and stop this before my heart gets involved, but I keep going back because I'm already in too deep. I should have known that the temptation wasn't worth the risk because when it all falls apart, our promises are broken and I'm afraid my heart will never recover. So overall, I would say that I recommend it if you do love enemies to lovers romances or even forced proximity romances where two people are snowed in together, or even like, hot cowboys, which Rowan is. It was no secret in their small town that Charlotte did not like Rowan ever since her sister said that he cheated on her. Turns out it wasn't true, and that's not a spoiler, as they were just hooking up, but Charlotte, being the good sister, always turned her nose up at Rowan and didn't hold back on the hate. And, she's a girl trying to run her family farm that she took over, that neighbors Rowan's farm, but she's losing money and on the verge of losing the farm itself. And they're both, as the summary said, are going after the same contract to sell their milk, but in the midst of, their work, they go off on this weekend with friends and they ended up getting stranded in the snow and ice storm, yada, yada, yada. So a good read, your typical enemies to lovers romance, and I like how they still nagged at each other after finally admitting that they fell in love with one another. I just didn't really fall for either character myself, but that doesn't mean I didn't really mind reading it, I guess. And I would say I'd recommend it if you like hot cowboys. It's book 3 in the Whitlock family series, but I read it as a standalone and really had no problems. It just wasn't one that honestly stood out and one I wouldn't reread. But next up, I did get to sink my teeth into a new romantasy as I'm on the hunt for the next big romantasy book of the year before Onyx Storm releases in January, Rebecca Yarros' next book. It's another book on my most anticipated new romance books of 2024 list, which was A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen that I also snagged from the library. The hardcover has these beautiful, like, blue silver sprayed edges. It was super pretty. But here is what it's about. Bound in an unwanted marriage, Freya's life is upended when her husband betrays her to the region's Jarl, landing her in a fight against his son, Bjorn. To survive, Freya must reveal her deepest secret, that she is a shield maiden with magic capable of repelling any attack. Believing he's destined to rule Skaland as king, the fanatical Jarl binds Freya with a blood oath and orders Bjorn to protect her from their enemies. Desperate to prove her strength, Freya must train to fight and learn to control her magic, but her greatest test may be resisting her forbidden attraction to Bjorn. So Danielle L. Jensen is probably well known for her Bridge Kingdom series, so I knew going into this that this writer had the chops, for writing fantasy romance. And I really did love it, which launches a brand new series, which is based on Norse mythology, which I think is just super cool and just unique in its way of pulling in those gods and maybe others, I'm not really sure. But right from the start, Jensen wrote a really great opening. You instantly hated Freya's husband and could sympathize with her plight. The meet cute, I'd say, with Bjorn was perfect, and their attraction was just instantaneous. I guess I should have known what was coming next given the book summary, but it was still sort of unsettling and unnerving to see how it would end when she had to fight Bjorn. But after that, it sort of led to Bjorn being tasked with, staying close to Freya, basically at her side every day going forward. And Bjorn, honestly, was the best part of this book for me. While somewhat of an enigma, he became devoted to Freya's safety and wanted more for her than her, supposed fate as told by the prophecy. I loved how his care for her, it was just so apparent, even though she was married to his father. He was never far and always just the protector. My overall opinion of Freya, I think might have been a product of listening to the audiobook. The narrator's accent did give this like Norse feel to the story, but she kind of made Freya act like an ass and it's just downright annoying sometimes, though I think, again, it's just sort of because of the narration of the story. I'm always a fan of fantasy romance books with strong heroines, and she definitely is strong and smart. She believes in family loyalty almost to a fault, however, which is why I'm glad that she had Bjorn in her corner. Sometimes I find, the first book in a new series can feel like just a bunch of world building, which this definitely had, but it also kind of felt like a complete book to me, which I was grateful for. It does end on a really good cliffhanger, and so I'm definitely going to be picking up book 2 when it releases. So I would recommend this book if you love epic fantasy romance series, devoted heroes, or even just Norse mythology, because it's definitely worth picking up. So next I was in the mood for a hockey romance because who doesn't love a good hockey romance? And they're super popular these days. It's like, gosh, everywhere I turn, I feel like there's some new author I'm not familiar with coming out with a new adult hockey romance because they seem to be all the rage. But I decided to pick up Breakaway by Grace Riley since it was available on Kindle Unlimited. It is a spicy coach's daughter college sports romance, which is second in the Beyond the Play series, but I have not read the first in the series, and it really wasn't a problem. But here is what it is about if you're not familiar. Cooper. As a pro-bound college athlete with a good time reputation, I usually have my pick of puck bunnies. But lately, I've been in a dry spell that feels more like a curse, and the stress is affecting my game. The one thing that can't happen if I'm going to make team captain and eventually the NHL. Enter Penny Ryder. She's my coach's daughter, but the moment she pulls me into that ice rink closet, she's the one thing on my mind besides hockey. She has a sex bucket list, and each item on it confirms we're kindred spirits in the bedroom. If I say yes, I'll be relaxed on the ice again. But if her dad finds out, I'll be forced to say goodbye to being captain and finally earning my own father's approval. Penny. Thanks to the ex from hell, I'm a long way from being ready for a relationship, but it's time to reclaim my agency, one long sought-after experience in bed at a time. Enter Cooper Callahan. He's my dad's star defenseman, and arrangement with him will mean keeping yet another major secret from my father. But the agreement we strike is simple: secret friends with benefits until he makes captain. And I cross off everything on my list so I can finally move on from the incident that ruined both my life and my figure skating career. Yet the longer our connection goes on, the more we trust each other and the less I want to say goodbye. I know love leads to heartbreak, but what if it can also clear the ice for a breakaway? So this was my first read by Grace Riley, and I will definitely be reading more from her. I liked this book that brought a hot hockey player whose game was suffering because of his high-strung temper, who was looking to just get himself some to relax, and then the former ice skater who was trying to gain her confidence back in the bedroom. They were honestly just a perfect match for one another, only Penny was Cooper's hockey coach's daughter, making her a bit off limits, but, that didn't really keep their hands off each other for long. At first, I was sort of caught off guard by how in your face Penny is with her sexual desires. And this book is pretty much, honestly, one sex scene after another. But I think that's because I went into it with this, wrong expectation that this was a girl who was maybe shy or naive and wanted someone to help her check off all these boxes on her sex list. But that wasn't Penny at all once you start reading the book. And I'm actually glad that Riley didn't go in that direction like so many other, relationship coach books. It wasn't really about him coaching her at all even. It was just him being a willing and able body to do all the things that she's always just wanted to try. So Penny really was a woman who embraced her sexuality and her sexual desires. She was someone who wanted to try it all, but she had some PTSD that was sort of keeping her from trying anything sexual with someone and even preventing her from bringing on her own orgasms. So I liked that there was really no shaming in what she wanted to do or what her interests were. I did have a problem, though, with Cooper announcing to several of their peers that he was her sex teacher. I mean, it's none of their freaking business, and you shouldn't be just sharing that with your roommates or siblings or teammates at random. But Penny didn't seem to care, and she was just psyched that he was willing to do whatever was on her list. And her list, people, was pretty comprehensive, let me tell you. We even got some extra sex scenes in the epilogues, maybe because Riley was like, oh, I forgot to have them do this, so let me do that. And I actually can't believe that I actually started skimming some of the sex scenes because there was just a lot. And so if you don't really like steamy books, then you might want to skip this one. And this is probably, I want to say, like the 10th book, although I'm totally making up that number, that I've read in the last 2 weeks, it seems, where the hero calls the heroine his good girl. So there's that too. I have no idea what it is with that phrase this day and age. I think every author is like just throwing it into their books, but whatever. I actually didn't mind it. And if you don't either, and if you like hockey romances, new adult college romances, or just want to read about someone exploring her sexuality, then you can check this book out. I actually ended up reading another hockey romance in a book with all of the tropes next, including nanny romance, forced proximity, age gap, more bedroom lessons. Oh my gosh. And this book was Learn Your Lesson by Candy Steiner, which just released. I don't know if you caught my podcast episode, I think it was episode 47, where I talked with Candy about this new release, and she gave us all the inside scoop about the book and writing it. It was just so much fun talking with her. It was my first time meeting this author. And after our conversation, I was just like chomping at the bit to read this. And it really did not disappoint. So if you did not listen to that episode or know about this book, here is what it's about. My mother only wanted me to learn one lesson growing up. Men are trash. Her father left her, and then my father left us. Being raised by her and my grandmother, I was surrounded by the reminder to be independent and guard my heart. After my one and only experience with a boy in college fell flatter than a pancake, I realized they were right, and I was content to live the life of a 26-year-old cat lady until Will Perry blew my quiet world to smithereens. Starting goalie for the Tampa Bay Ospreys and the kind of hot that scrambles your brain, all I was ever supposed to be to him was his daughter's kindergarten teacher. Then, in a twist of events, his temporary nanny. But temporary turns to permanent, and when I move into his pool house, everything changes. He's impossibly grumpy and focused on only 2 things, hockey and taking care of his daughter. I'm only focused on using this new income to pay back my student loans, but in that house, I feel his heated gaze beneath that permanent scowl, the way it lingers and warms my skin. And though I know my mother would lose her mind if she knew, my dreams have become midnight fantasies about my long-haired, muscle-lined mystery of a boss. When the tension becomes too much, we break and we make a deal. He still needs a nanny, I still need a paycheck, and for my matriarchy to not disown me. But Will agrees to teach me everything I've always wanted to learn, and I'm all too eager to be his student. I can do this. I'm a grown woman. I can explore my curiosities with the hottest goalie on earth and still remain 100% professional. And I can definitely do it all without catching feelings. I have to, otherwise I'll end up brokenhearted in my mother's arms while she shakes her head and asks me if I'll ever learn my lesson. So I adored this book. It's available in Kindle Unlimited, so if you love hockey romances or even any of the tropes that I mentioned earlier, then I highly, highly recommend it. Candy balances the sweet with the spicy in this one. Both Daddy P and Chloe really needed a bit of loving in their lives, but when Chloe shares that she really doesn't have a lot of experience and he volunteers to show her anything that she wants, oh my gosh. Man, as I said earlier, do I love teaching books. And sometimes kids in romance books can just sort of be hit or miss for me, but I adored Daddy P's little daughter, Ava. She was just the spitting image of her dad, and she kind of broke my heart at the beginning. But her transformation was just everything. And her saying to get through life was just adorable and yet heart-wrenched whenever she just first shared it in this book. It's book 3 in her Kings of the Ice series and can absolutely be read as a standalone. I think it's my favorite of the series so far. So I highly, highly recommend it. Such a good read and one of Candy's best. Absolutely. Turning from hockey romance, I turn to more of a summer romance, the first being One Last Summer by Kate Spencer, which is on my list of must-read summer romance books for 2024. I actually just dropped that episode on the blog if you want to check out my must-read summer romances for the year. And I actually just spoke with Kate about this upcoming release, which drops in June. So stay tuned for that podcast episode coming up very soon. She was, again, just a gem to talk with. We had a really, really fun conversation. But here is what her book is about. Clara Millen's life is spiraling out of control. Her dream job is a nightmare. She's resoundingly single, and it's been years since she's taken some time off. Thankfully, the last problem she can fix. This year, she'll join her friends on their annual summer vacation to their beloved childhood sleepover camp for a much-needed escape. But when Clara arrives at Pine Lake Camp, she faces yet another unwelcome change. Owners are retiring and selling the property. The news turns her plans for revelry into a night of reminiscing and prompts a surprise heart-to-heart between Clara and Mac, her old camp nemesis and constant competitor who's still just as annoying and annoyingly handsome. Soon the campfires aren't all that's throwing off sparks, and one wildly passionate night turns into two, then too many to count. Clara begins to wonder if she and Mac could have a future together. But when Clara's boss finally offers her everything she's worked so hard for, Clara will need to decide if the life she's always wanted is the life that makes her feel truly alive. So, I totally fell in love with Spencer's debut novel, In a New York Minute, which released in 2022. So I was sort of just beyond excited to read this second book, and it really did not disappoint. If you are looking for a book to make you nostalgic for youthful summer spent at summer camp, or a book to inspire you to finally seize the life you've always wanted, then this is it. I think a lot of readers, including myself, may be able to identify with Clara. You're almost in midlife and you realize that your life isn't necessarily following into the plan you had set for yourself. She, however, has a letter from her younger self that shows her just how off the mark her current life is, and it sort of throws her into a tailspin. Then also throw in a bit of work burnout and a forced opportunity to spend a week with her friends, and Clara finds herself really trying to relive that fun of summer camp days one last time. Well, I have never been to or had the whole sleepover camp experience. This book really made me nostalgic for it and jealous of something that I could have had in my life. I'd be up for a summer, of sleeping in cabins, participating in relay races and competitions, swimming in the lake, and exploring nature if I got to do it with a group of friends who would stick with me for years to come. Clara is really lucky to have that friend group, and yet I could also understand how she kind of let those friendships sort of take a back seat to her job and her relationship. And so only being forced to spend a week with them did she realize what she'd been doing and what she'd been missing. For me, the best parts of the book, in addition to the camp nostalgia, is Clara's awareness of how her life has gotten off the rails from overworking so much, and seeing her reflect on her priorities and make changes was fun, though I'm not sure I would check off that last box of hers in quite the same way that she did, but there's that. And of course, returning to her summer camp of youth put her in front of her camp crush, Mac, and I was all over their connection. I'm glad that Spencer didn't really draw out their romance, but jumped us right into it, and so that they could sort of work through their own issues. I liked their chemistry together, even if they really needed to work on their communication. But it made their romance a really great addition to the story and Clara's transformation. This book, I love the setting too. It takes place in Boston, which was so much fun because I lived there for so long. So it was just neat to reminisce about the public gardens and the swan boats, and then even like the beautiful lakes of New Hampshire. So I loved that part too. It's definitely a great book to read this summer. I highly recommend it. The next book I tried to read this month, honestly, I really did, and that was The Idea of You by Robin Lee, because the movie just dropped on Prime Video. I love Anne Hathaway and knew I probably wanted to watch it, but I wanted to check out the book first because the book is usually always better, right? When it comes to adaptations. Here's what it's about if you're not familiar. Solange Marchand, the 39-year-old owner of an art gallery in Los Angeles, is reluctant to take her daughter Isabel to meet her favorite boy band. But since her divorce, she's more eager than ever to be close to Isabel. The last thing Solange expects is to make a connection with one of the members of the world-famous August Moon. But Hayes Campbell is clever, winning, confident, and posh, and the attraction is immediate. That he is all of 20 years old further complicates things. What begins as a series of clandestines quickly evolves into a passionate and genuine relationship. It's a journey that spans continents as Solange and Hayes navigate each other's worlds, from stadium tours to international art fairs to secluded hideaways in Paris and Miami. For Solange, is a reclaiming the self as well as a rediscovery of happiness and love. But when their romance becomes a viral sensation and both she and her daughter become the target of rabid fans and an insatiable media, Solange must face how her romantic life has impacted the lives of those she cares about most. Okay, so honestly, I haven't finished this book. The writing is good, but I don't know what it was. I just wasn't really feeling the story, to be honest. And it was hard to really feel for and like the characters, so I just put it down for now. It's in Kindle Unlimited, which is why I decided to try and quickly read it before the movie release. And so I might circle back to it for someday. I don't know, but for now, I'm good with just sort of moving on. Maybe I'll check out the movie. I'm not even sure, to be honest. So moving on from The Idea of You, the next book on my list is a young adult romance that someone had said was their best book that they've read in 2024. So I'm like, okay, I'm game. I'm going to read this to see if this is the case. And that book is Not Made to Last by Jay McLean, which released earlier this month. And here is what it's about. Olivia. Rise Garrett, recent high school graduate, ex-captain of the basketball team, and my brother's rival both on and off the court. Oh, and he's also the guy I just hit with my truck. To be fair, he had it coming. Why else was he dressed in all black in the middle of the night if not to hide out amongst the darkness? Reese. Is it Reese? Rice? I don't know. Reese. I'll say Reese. I wasn't looking where I was going or what was around me. I didn't even see the headlights, just felt the impact. And I thought, as strange as it was, that getting hit by a car may be the best thing that could have happened to me, until I opened my eyes and she told me her name. Some might call it fate, destiny, kismet, a collision of souls, one night, one chance encounter. The problem, one night wasn't enough, but the more time we spent together, the more truths came to light, and soon we discover what we once thought was meant to be is not made to last. Okay, so I'll just say it right from the start. This will not make my list of best romance books of 2024. It does have good writing, which many Jay McLean books do, but the story just jumps around a lot and gets really kind of confusing. It starts off really interesting, I will say that, but then it just sort of veers off where I'm like, what is the point that this book is trying to make? I'm just so confused. This is also the second Jay McLean book that has a trigger warning that I always steer clear of. It really doesn't come up until much later in the book, but still, I just kind of wish I knew that in advance. I did like the found family aspect and totally adored Olivia's little brother, Max. He was so freaking cute. And did I like the tie-in with the Count of Monte Cristo book? Yes, I totally did. But as a complete story, I think it could have just been tighter and maybe not so confusing, jumping back timelines, future to past. That probably would be my suggestion. But I'd say if you like Jay McLean books, then give it a go. If not, unless you want a heavy young adult romance that jumps a bit, then I would say maybe just pass on this one. Okay, we've made it to the last book that I read this month, which was also on my list of best romance or was on my list of most anticipated romance books, and now is on my list of best romance books of 2024 because I just loved it so much and it totally delivered and then some. And that is Savor It by Tara DeWitt, which will be releasing later this month. This is a fake dating, sort of wounded hero, strong heroine, small town, guardian ward romance with a chef who can cook. Well, he can't initially, but the man has skills, and I'll totally get into that. But here is what it's about. Sage Bird has lived in the coastal town of Spoons, Oregon, not to be confused with Forks, Washington, her entire life. She's learned to love her small world with the misfit animals on her hobby farm and her friendships with the town's inhabitants. But when her 5-year relationship ends and her ex, town golden boy Ian, suddenly gets engaged, Sage needs a win, something that will convince everyone to stop pitying her all the time and to put Ian in his place. The Festival of Spoons, the town's annual summer competition, would be the perfect opportunity. She just needs a partner. Fisher Lang was a hotshot chef in New York City until the loss of his sister left him numb, grieving, and responsible for his teenage niece, Indy. When Fisher loses his Michelin star along with his love of cooking, his boss sends him and Indy to Spoons on a much-needed summer sabbatical to consult on a restaurant opening. But when clashes with the townspeople threaten his last chance to redeem himself and a kiss with his new neighbor Sage leads to dating rumors, a strategic alliance might just be the best way to turn things around. A deal is struck. Sage will improve Fisher's image in his eyes of the town and remove the roadblocks he is facing with the restaurant, and Fisher will be Sage's partner for the competition. But as their pact quickly turns into steamy rendezvous, emotional wounds begin to heal, and the pair tries to savor every moment. They start to realize that summer is racing by much faster than they would like. Okay, this was my first DeWitt romance and is truly, truly a book to savor in 2024. One of the year's best that will have you weeping and swooning and giving you all of the feels. I honestly don't think my review that's up on the blog will, or even here, will sort of do it justice because it's kind of hard to put into words just what I loved about this book, but I will try. First, I totally felt for Sage, the heroine, in her struggles in life, her need for just a small victory, for someone to see her more than just the nice girl about town. She needed to feel like she was worth something and to feel like she had a win in life, and I was really rooting for her the entire time. Then there's Fisher, and his grief and struggles were so palpable, yet he was really just a man trying, right? He was trying to find his way back to his passion in the kitchen, trying to find his way to being the best guardian for his niece, trying to emerge from the grief of loss, and trying to find his worth again, really. I adored how Sage didn't let him hide, but slowly coaxed him out of his shell. And then the scene, where he just runs his latest cooking creations to Sage early in the morning was so incredible. I felt so much joy for his character on the page. And then, of course, my mouth was watering at the dish description. Holy moly, were they amazing? And do I want to eat every one? So you're just going to be hungry when you read that part of the book. The two of them flirting was super hot and came at these just perfect moments that hit you in all of the feels. It just felt like this perfect slow burn that would just catch fire, right, at the best times. And I could not put the book down because I only really wanted more of them. The writing, the story pacing, the character development, they were just perfection. I absolutely love the dialogue between these characters that really let them drop their walls and really show their true selves, their hurts, their flaws, and it only just made me love them all of the more. Fisher and Sage were so good together, and it's really their relationship, I should say, that drives this book. That sounds kind of silly because, of course, their relationship drives a romance book, but I kind of anticipated more scenes of, Fisher working on the new restaurant or them hamming up their fake relationship for the sake of others in the town, or even more focus on Fisher's relationship with his niece based on that book summary. But those side stories honestly kind of took a back seat to what was really Fisher and Sage's story. You get just enough of those other elements to help propel the story along, but it's really just them that captivates in this story. And I will say, this book totally made me ugly cry. Oh my gosh. I mean, I had tears streaming, and my husband's like, is this the book, or are you okay? Or are you not okay, I should have said. There were so many moments that just made me tear up, but then by the end, I think I was just full on sobbing. No joke. But I love books that can evoke such strong feelings, and this one definitely did throughout. So just go ahead, pre-order it, or put it on your read list at the library. You won't regret it. It was awesome. So it's so nice to end on that high note, a 5-star read for April, but that is my list. So many great books to share, and I hope that you will pick some up and let me know what you think of them after reading them. Even better, you can join the book club and share what you think in the community forum so we can talk about them together. That would be really, really fun. So check out the link in the show notes so you can join the book club. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, until next time, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.